"Come on, Grant." Chorix shouted over the sounds of the explosions. The insect-like alien turned back to stare at the human, which was panting in quick, uneven breaths. "I'm trying," Grant responded, exasperated. They were easily on the 15th mile of this marathon battery of exams. Grant didn't know how the other species were so proficient. Long legs, strong muscles, they were able to outrun and outfight him. Still, the boreless conglomerate's drill instructors pushed Grant as hard as the rest of them. Harder, even, because they regularly made him run extra routines due to his subpar performance. The contempt was written all over their faces. Even the other cadets had grown exhausted by Grant's inability. Small fish, they called him, often after pushing him to the ground or unmaking his bed. He tried to fight back, but his attempts only intensified their derisive laughter. Chorix was one of the only ones that tried to be understanding. The Modi, born of a hive-like society, would do his best to protect the young human. Even he was not enough to keep the massive Nashi twins from having their fun at Grant's expense. But he tried, and for that Grant was forever grateful. The human repaid the kindness by offering to help the Modi with the intellectual demands of the boreless conglomerate's military academy program. The human excelled at mathematics and history. Chorix regularly complimented the blonde-haired boy on his knowledge. It wasn't much, but it was more than nothing. Grant wanted to be as good as the other species. Better even, if he could manage it. Nashi were the most powerful of the assorted creatures. Modi were the most flexible and lithe. The cat-like Nabori were the fastest. Sleek scales separated them from the variety that Grant had once owned, years before. It always hurt to remember the past. Still, it was always there, just at the fringes of his mind. Grant's dreams were haunted by the sights and sounds of the destruction. The scream of his mother's voice, the last time that he would ever hear it, would wake him up in the middle of the night. In the darkness he would cross the freshman dormitory to the washrooms to wipe the cold sweat off of his pale skin. He had been 6 when the fires had consumed the human race. The memories were more of a half-dream now, 6 years later, but Grant remembered the fear. The fear that had seemed to bubble and fester in every heart among mankind. The Vod were coming. Most of humanity was uncertain as to why they had been chosen for eradication. Some of them tried to find peace with their coming end. Some reached out to the other species of the galaxy for help. None offered to help. None dared. The Vod were not to be trifled with. In the end, the boreless conglomerate had sent 2 ships to pick up children. The company's president had recently been on the receiving end of a breach of contract regarding Vod arms manufacturing, resulting in the loss of billions of Hunan credits. It was, therefore, mostly a simple petty revenge on the warlike species to save some small piece of the human race. If they were to be saved, then they were also to be put to work. So when he had been 7, Grant had been tested for aptitude. He had failed every test miserably. He was too weak to compete for manual labor. He didn't know how to prepare the various delicacies that the galaxy enjoyed and had no interest in learning them. Most of the saved humans had followed this route, young as they were. The girls especially were prized. Others had gone into warship maintenance. It is amazing what small hands and bodies can fix on the great galactic warships. With proper training, young humans proved to be nearly as proficient as the ever-engineering-focused droll. At least, while they were young enough to compete with the aliens' long flexible tendrils. In the end, Grant had failed every single aptitude test. The instructor, a Modi named Chassis, had scrawled only one positive word about the blonde human. Determined. That one word saved Grant's life. Or, another way of seeing it, made him live in hell for the next 5 years. He was enlisted in the Boreless Special Tasks and Enforcement Corps, with many other youths of the galaxy. Only the poorest and most marginalized aliens would sell their offspring into bondage and service. In that way, Grant was really not so different from the rest. They had all been abandoned, in one way or another. The young boy felt that he was lucky, in the smallest of ways, to know that his mother and father had loved him enough to carry him through the choking ash and the boiling plasma to one of the boreless transports that had come down to carry away so few of the species. The Vod had taken care of the rest. That all felt like a lifetime ago now. Now all that mattered was making it to the next ridgeline. Orda Company had set up their base of operations in a cave that overlooked the whole valley. Their laser rifles, only capable of stunning the other cadets and freezing their armor, had rained havoc on Arata Company. Arata's cadet-in-chief Matrix Bural had ordered Chorix and Grant to flank the enemy's position. It was a daunting task and one that had little hope of success. Grant figured that it was just as likely as not that the Forta, with his smug grin lined with razor-sharp spines, just wanted to pair out of his vicinity. It was whispered among Arata Company that Chorix and his pet human were secretly in love, which intrigued and disturbed the other cadets in equal measure. "We're almost there, Grant." Chorix tried to be supportive. Grant could see that the insectoid alien was exhausted, too. Its limbs sagged under the weight of the mesh-weave cloth and the padding that it contained. The pounding heat from the blue sun overhead was as draining on the Modi as the human. Glancing up, Grant felt a bead of sweat drop into his eyes. The sting was sharp and immediate and caused him to shut his eyelids tightly. He felt his foot catch on an outcropping rock. A moment later, he felt his faceplate crack from the impact of his head against the ground. His laser rifle bounced away. It teetered on the edge of the ridgeline for a second, just long enough for the human to be filled with a kind of hopeless despair. Then, it fell. Grant bolted upright and raced after it. In doing so, he nearly fell straight off the 50-foot sheer cliff face over which his weapon had just toppled. He watched the shining black and red gun hit the rocks and shatter into half a dozen glimmering pieces. They bounced merrily away, as if mocking the boy. Tears immediately filled Grant's steel blue eyes. It was a combination of exhaustion and frustration. "I never wanted this." A salty water droplet rolled down his cheek. "I just want to go home." Chorix cuddled up beside him. The alien's 5-eye stalks watched the final pieces of Grant's shattered gun find permanent resting places among the sharp rocks below. "That's no good," the alien stated, matter-of-factly. Grant whimpered in response. The clattering of rocks behind them caused a pair to turn. "Freeze there, space slime." A howling voice called to them. Grant saw the purple insignia on a gold field and knew they were doomed. Nazar, the older of the two Nashi twins, grinned with long, sharp teeth. His weapon was pointed at the green and gray pair of cadets. Grant knew that if he shot either of them now, the freezing of their armor could easily cause them to fall backwards off the cliff. Grant was not at all confident that the Nashi would refrain from doing just that. Chorix dropped his rifle. It clanged against the rocks below. Insectoid feelers rose into the air in surrender. "The instructors are watching us," Grant thought. "They must be watching us. They wouldn't let us die." He wasn't anything resembling certain about that fact, but it was reassuring to allow himself to believe it. Grant raised his small, pale hands into the air too. He felt a shiver course through his body, despite the blast furnace temperatures on the ridge. "You got us, Nazar," he called to the other alien. "We surrender." Nazar smiled wider, teeth flashed in the sunlight. "Quiet, small fish," the alien commanded. "I know I have you. The question is, do I take you prisoner or do I send you flying?" Grant took a step forwards, away from the cliff. Nazar turned his light rifle at the human and growled menacingly. The boy froze in place. "Stay right there, human." The Nashi spat. "Come on, Nazar," Chorix said, almost pleadingly. "You win, we give up." The Nashi let out a howling laugh. "Yeah, I guess," he told them. "But I really only need one prisoner." There was a bright flash. The cracking ring of a light rifle sounded in Grant's ears. He wondered briefly if he was hit. The sound of Chorix collapsing answered his question. The Modi fell down as his suit solidified around him. Grant turned to help his comrade. 5-eye stalks were wide with terror as the creature fell over the edge. The sickening crunch that followed brought tears to Grant's eyes. His lips trembled as he stared down the cliff. A childish wail echoed through the canyon. Grant felt a rage inside of him. He turned and charged Nazar, who had begun to laugh heartily at his own handiwork. The alien started laughing even harder when the small human began flailing helplessly at him. Grant was blinded by anger and hate and pain. He wished that Nazar had never been born. He wished that a billion suns would go supernova. He wished that the universe would cease to exist. He wished for his mother and father. He wished for his home. Mostly, Grant wished for Chorix, who lay dead upon the rocks far below. In the end, Nazar knocked the human unconscious with a single blow to the side of the head. Everything went dark for Grant. In some ways, it was almost a blessing, sweet nothingness, an eternal void, no pain or anguish, no dreams or nightmares. Author's name and the link to original text in the description. Consider tapping the thumbs up and pressing the subscribe button if you enjoyed this video. And please join our channel.